Welcome to another episode of Palestine An Organic Story. I am Fiza Jamal and I am calling myself a situation observer, like all of you as well, who are currently observing and following up on the stories that are happening in Palestine right now with Israel. I have been going through the social media coverage and the mainstream news media coverage, and the contrasts that I've found in both of them are drastically high. And although mainstream media is being very careful in how they report the stories, but social media as well is facing some restrictions. My previous YouTube video, the comment section was disabled automatically. I hadn't disabled it, and I actually got a few messages saying that they need to comment, but they are unable to. So they requested me to open the comment section, but I found out that it's not me who has disabled it. So it is quite sensitive what's going on between Israel and Palestine. As I release this video on my social media, at least 140 people have been killed in Palestine on the occupied West Bank, and they include 39 children, and almost 950 Palestinians are wounded. Their homes have been destroyed, and the refugee camps have also been attacked, by the way. And in comparison, 10 Israelis have been killed by reportedly rockets that launched from Gaza. So for today's talk, I have invited Khair Ali Behram. He is a social activist and he lives in the city of Nablus. And he's going to be speaking about the media coverage and how unfair and unjust and hypocritical the American foreign policy is. So let's get into this conversation right now. And I hope you also learned something from this. Assalamu alaikum, Khair. Thank you so much for giving me your time for this talk.
Walaikum assalam. You're very welcome. I'm also glad to have it with you.
Great. Khair, I've been following the news and the situation unfolding between Palestine and Israel. And it's interesting how the media is portraying it. And you, as a social activist, how do you feel about the situation right now?
Well, our feelings in general as Palestinians right now is a mixture of sadness and anger about what's happening in Gaza and in Jerusalem and in the West Bank and across the lands of 1948. This time I could describe it that it's unusual to the events, how it escalated. How things escalated from Gaza was a natural answer to what the Israeli forces has been doing in Jerusalem. It's not something new what they have been doing in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. It's something that they've been doing for years and years since 1967, since they occupied Jerusalem and the West Bank, especially with the increasing of the number of settlements in the West Bank, illegal settlements. Also, the apartheid system that the Israeli military is trying to apply within the West Bank and within Jerusalem, which has affected the life of every Palestinian living there. And we can see as well today, with the escalation of the situation, how this apartheid system is being applied also to the Palestinians living inside Israel, the holders of the Israeli nationality.
Khair, you're living in Nablus, right? In the city of Nablus.
Nablus, yes.
Nablus. Thank you for correcting me. So Nablus is really close to the area where Israel is bombing relentlessly. So tell me about your environment right now. Do you hear those bombs go off all the time? And how far or close are you from the area of danger?
Actually, if I would say that with the escalation of the situation, every area now is a possible danger to any Palestinian or Arab living there. The area that has been bombing for the last few days is Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is separated from the West Bank where I live. Nablus city is located in the West Bank, and the West Bank is under the direct occupation of the Israeli army. Meaning that in Gaza Strip, the Israeli army actually inside the Gaza Strip doesn't have an occupation force. it has been applying a siege over Gaza Strip for the last since 2006. And ever since that time, nothing enters or goes out of Gaza except under the Israeli control. In the West Bank, the situation is that in the West Bank, we're living under the Israeli army control, also the settlers, because there are more than 600,000 settlers living inside the West Bank, protected by the Israeli army. Recently, there has been so many incidents of Palestinians getting shot and killed on Israeli checkpoints that are separated Palestinian cities within the West Bank. So you could say that any Palestinian is under the Israeli army danger and the settlers' danger in the West Bank and in Gaza Strip.
So when you use the term settlers, you're calling settlers the Israeli people who are moving from Israel to the occupied West Bank, right?
Yes, and not only from Israel, because Israel as a country, and this is something that it's a fact that we need to know. And unfortunately, most of the mainstream media doesn't reflect these truths to the world, so they could understand how the situation here. Because when I say settler or I say settlements, it's hard for someone who's living outside of Palestine to understand or to even imagine what it means. The Israeli army has made it impossible for people outside of Palestine to understand or even imagine what it looks like to live in the West Bank, unless you come here and see with your own eyes. So when I say a settler or I say a settlement, what would come to your mind is a foreigner who's living in a country that doesn't belong to him. But actually, when I'm talking about settlements here in the West Bank, it's not just the small villages. It's more of a small cities that the Israeli army has established within the Palestinian land, inside Palestine, in the West Bank, that it has universities, it has hospitals, it has special roads, it has a roads only for settlers that Palestinians and Arabs are not allowed to take. And I'm not talking about Israel. I'm talking about 1967 lands. I'm talking about the West Bank. So it is really hard to describe the situation that the Israeli government has applied within the West Bank throughout the previous years.
It is quite unsettling to know all of this. Khair, thank you for informing me about that. And as we speak, 140 are dead, including 39 children, and 950 are wounded. And in return, Israel is reporting that 10 Israelis have been killed by rockets fired from the West Bank. So here we are talking about 140 people and 950 wounded and 10 people killed.
Yeah, it's obviously that there is an imbalance of power there. And you're not talking about two equal powers fighting against each other as any international conflict that we would see today. In the case of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's really different. And unfortunately, the mainstream media in the West, and unfortunately nowadays in some Arab countries that have been trying to normalize with Israel, we see how the double standards are playing there. You're not talking about two equal sides. You're talking about an oppressed and an oppressor. You're talking about one of the most powerful military countries in the world, which is Israel, and you're talking about an occupied people who are trying to do whatever in their hands to defend themselves. You know, right. There is something in politics that say that the world doesn't respect the weak. As Palestinians, we don't want the world to be looking at us in a way of pittiness, in a way of you understand what I mean?
I do.
Tired of that. Yes, we recognize that we are oppressed. We know that we are the ones who got right in our hand.
Yeah.
That's why we believe, as it is mentioned in the Charter of the United Nations, that any nation that has been oppressed and occupied has the right to defend itself with any means possible. So when you're talking about this imbalance of power and how the mainstream media is covering it, it is hard to ignore how the media is turning a blind eye to the Israeli aggression and to the atrocities that it's committing against the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and inside the 1948 lands.
We spoke about the mainstream media coverage, but there's also social media coverage going on. In fact, this episode is going to be released, uploaded on social media. So far, the social media coverage that I've seen, it's more realistic than the mainstream media, since people can report directly from where they're living and they can speak their minds,
Yes,
right?
because basically there is no control over social media as it is. There is actually control, and this is something that we've noticed since the beginning of this bombardment over Gaza Strip, that Facebook, Instagram policy has been also siding. They've been deleting so many posts, they've been restricting so many activists' accounts who are trying to spread the news about what's happening. Even with the social media, there is some kind of unfortunately, there is some kind of imbalance. There is some kind of double standards that have been going there, but people are posting, people are trying their best to spread about what's happening right now. Yes.
It's funny you speak about double standards on social media, because, you know, the last episode I uploaded on my YouTube channel, the comment section was automatically disabled. I hadn't disabled it.
I'm not surprised.
And somebody told me that we cannot comment under your video. Can you please open the comment section? And I said, I never disabled it. So I went through my settings and I realized I never disabled it. So it's quite interesting that you speak about the double standards, although they didn't take down my video. They just, because the purpose of doing all of this is to initiate a discourse, right? Initiate a discourse that what's happening in Palestine is not right. So this makes you realize that, as you said, it's an imbalance of power. Palestinians are up against possibly the world's most strongest military and the entire social media, of course, because USA is the biggest ally of Israel.
Yes, it's not only, I wish it's not only that they are the strongest military, they are the strongest in terms of lobbying in superpowers. It's the strongest lobby in the United States, in the European Union. They have immense power over media, over everything. And we're realizing this on the way of how the European Union, how the American foreign policy is dealing with this struggle, unfortunately. And I always said, in international relations, the Israeli-Palestinian struggle is the strongest way of exposing American foreign policy double standards.
Yes, they want to push for a joint nation theory.
You mean the two-state solution, which is the American foreign policy has been always trying to push forward, as well as the BA here. But when you come, as I said to you early in this interview, everyone is speaking about what's happening in Palestine. Everyone is talking about settlements, the Gaza Strip siege. Everyone is talking about the violence against the Arabs, against the Palestinians. But Israel has made it so hard to present these things on the media, because what they did on the ground is so ugly to be presented even. So it's so hard for people to imagine what it means unless they come and see with their eyes, unfortunately. And these double standards is not something new, actually. It's not, we got used to it. We're not expecting anything from the American foreign policy. And I think that our leadership is weak, and our the PA leadership is just maintaining the situation as it is, if they are expecting something from the US.
Why do you think the Palestinian leadership is weak?
Only me who's believing this, actually, because we're seeing nowadays the only action has been taken on the ground is by Palestinians themselves, by the resistance movements. Even if you agree or disagree with them, everyone is united now on the ground that this Israeli aggression needs to be stopped and needs to be answered. The Palestinian Authority has been trying to establish a negotiation with the Israeli side ever since Oslo Agreement. but we've all seen, we've all known, and history by itself can teach us a lesson, can show us that the more you try to give them a way to negotiate, the more you give them a way to establish what they call peace, as they say it, the more they will steal land, the more they will steal time to steal land to maintain the situation as it is. Yeah, the bombardment of Gaza, it's not the first time. It happened in 2008, it happened in 2010, 2012, 2014. And every once in a while, there is a bombing of Gaza. There are people being killed, even if a whole escalation of a situation doesn't start. It's the same in the West Bank. Every couple of days, there is a marcher. Either it's on a checkpoint, either it's on a settlement or somewhere inside. They're raiding my city every night. For Israeli violation of international law, of human rights, of everything is happening every day in the Palestinian land.
Earlier, you spoke about the United Nations Charter and the fact that it's, well, we all know that it is human rights violation, and especially the killing of children. There are multiple photos that I saw on my Instagram of little kids, dead bodies, burnt dead bodies. Of course, it's like the worst kind of war crime you can commit. So when you mentioned the UN Charter, and we spoke about US being a strongest ally, and today is the 6th consecutive day of the bombardment, how do you feel that the UN Security Council is playing its role?
I would say again, unfortunately, the history is our biggest teacher here. This struggle has been going for the last 37 years. Today is the Nakba Day. It's the memorandum of the 1948 Nakba catastrophe, the Palestinian catastrophe, with the Palestinians, when everything started, when the Palestinians were driven out of their lands, when they were massacred inside historical Palestine. It's been 73 years on the struggle. Nothing has changed. It has been only going worse. And the only lesson that we can, as Palestinians, learn today is that negotiation, giving up, or answering or waiting any kind of expected resolutions from the United Nations, Security Council, superpowers is in vain, is literally in vain. Resistance on the ground is the only answer to what's happening here. And history as well has proven that every aggression, every occupier has been moved only by resistance. And I can give you so many examples to this. Apartheid in South Africa, India, the Irish Revolution. All these examples tells us about how resistance and people being united on the ground on a specific means of resistance, it's the only answer to this aggression. That's why I urge the PA to stop the idea of negotiation, to stop the idea of expecting resolutions from outside of Palestine. They need to turn to their people.
And Khair, you earlier mentioned the Nakba Day or the Catastrophe Day. It was when 750,000 Palestinians were killed by the Zionist militia. And earlier we spoke about the American foreign policy double standard. It's funny because I think just a few months back, Joe Biden's administration actually recognized the Armenia massacre as a genocide. I mean, why was that a genocide? And why was the Nakba Day, when 750,000 Palestinians were killed by the Zionist militia, is not considered a genocide? How does that make you and your family, your friends feel? I mean, it must boil your blood, all this hypocrisy.
We've seen this hypocrisy for so many years. We've expected things from our neighbors. We've expected things from let's say, the modern world, as they call it today. To be siding with the oppressed people, to be siding with human rights, to be siding with the sound of people being massacred in Gaza right now. But unfortunately, this is not going to happen, and I don't believe it's going to happen. I also would ask that settlements, for example, the international community, the international law has issued that settlements is illegal. The Israeli building of settlements in the West Bank is illegal, but Israel have been building settlements since 1967. with no stop. It's just increasing.
It shows if you have powerful friends, then you can do whatever you want, and you can even
Yes,
kill children.
this is the world
I
we're
mean,
living in,
you will not be
unfortunately.
held
Exactly,
accountable even if you're
exactly.
killing children. Khair, they raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque actually just almost around a week ago. Why are Israelis after Al-Aqsa Mosque? Because Al-Aqsa Mosque has always been a holy area for Muslims all over the world. It means a lot to all the Muslims all over the world. Why are Israelis after Al-Aqsa Mosque now?
The Israelis have been after Al-Aqsa Mosque actually since the creation of the State of Israel. And the biggest example to that, many incidents that have happened. The second Intifada actually started because of the Prime Minister of Israel, Sharon, invading the Aqsa Mosque with his military and killing dozens of Palestinians that day. The second Intifada started after that incident, and we all know what the results of the second Intifada were. The Israeli, I would say, those these ultra religious groups, the settlers who are living in Jerusalem and inside Israel, they call themselves the temple groups, who believe that the more that there is the tomb of Solomon who's lying beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they're trying to raise it back. So they believe in the destruction and taking over, that they have a religious and essential right of taking over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And unfortunately, as Israel as describes itself as a democratic country who is helping and facilitating and making it easy for those religious groups to break into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, not only recently, it has been going all the time. There was always escalations, settlers attacking, settlers breaking into Al-Aqsa Mosque. But when it happened during the Ramadan month, which is known that it's the holiest month of the Muslim people, and everything happened, and also what has been happening in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, people couldn't take it anymore.
So explain more about Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. There's a court order that everybody is waiting for. And if they decide that, yes, the original people living in Sheikh Jarrah, they should be evacuated to settle in the settlers, as you said, what do you think will happen? Because now media is also covering it that it might turn into a full-blown war. So once that court order also comes through, what do you think the people around you, let's talk about the ground level, how would they react, and then what is going to happen?
First of all, I don't think that the Israeli government would dare to take such an action right now, or the Israeli court to replace the settlers inside Sheikh Jarrah. Look, I would give you an example. There is the city of Hebron. The city of Hebron is the largest city in the West Bank, and it is a Palestinian city. At the heart of the city of Hebron, in the old city, there are more than 700 settlers occupying Palestinian houses, occupying Palestinian streets, living in the heart of one of the largest Palestinian cities, guarded by more than 3,000 Israeli military soldiers. So I always say to my friends who are coming to visit Palestine, if you want to see the real face of occupation, go visit Hebron. Because what's been going inside Hebron, it's called Al-Khalil in Arabic, the city of Al-Khalil is the biggest example of the Israeli occupation of the West Bank. There are military checkpoints, there are division of areas, H1, H2. Inside, you're talking about inside the Palestinian city, with the Jewish settler roads only, that Palestinians cannot go to their neighborhoods. Some Palestinian families, they need to cross over roofs and buildings to get to their houses when the Israeli military decides to close the checkpoint. And during the last 2 years, so many Palestinians have been killed and shot dead in these checkpoints because of the suspicion or settlers being scared. So many settler attacks has been happening recently in the last 2 days over the Palestinian families living in Hebron. And it's also been going under the eye of the Israeli military, under the eye of the Israeli courts, Israeli occupation law. So, and this is one of the things why, unfortunately, the media is not covering this. When they are talking now about when they are describing how situation escalated recently in Gaza and in Sheikh Jarrah, some of the media saying Hamas fired rockets from Gaza, and then Israel replied, and then Hamas fired. It goes like this. Instead of that, why don't you go to the root cause of the problem? Why don't you go there and understand how everything started?
Khair, you mentioned about the apartheid situation and the Israeli security checkposts all around Hebron. Have you personally or any of your friends or family directly faced anything during this in this apartheid situation? Do you have an experience to share with us?
My experience is the same as any Palestinian experience living here. We've been exposed to I've been exposed to the second intifada. My generation has been exposed to the second intifada. We've witnessed the Israeli invasion of the Palestinian cities in 2002. We've witnessed the killings, the shootings, the curfews that lasted for days and days, the shortage of electricity, the shortage of water, the lack of access to medical care, the lack of access to freedom of movement. This is things that every Palestinian living here has witnessed and still witnessing to today. And I will tell you something. When I moved to Turkey 6 years ago, it was the first time actually for me to be exposed to what's called a normal life as a human being. To just, feeling how it is for a normal human being to live, to be free to go wherever they want without worrying, to be stopped by a checkpoint, to be killed by a settler.
So how did that make you feel?
It makes you feel angry, actually. It makes you feel more angry to the international community.
Khair, tell me about your restaurant business in Turkey. How are you using it to carry on the Palestinian heritage abroad?
This is a part of the Palestinian identity that Israelis has been trying to steal and as well to destroy since 1948. They started by destroying and hiding villages in Palestine in 1948. Then they started by changing names of streets. They started by taking the food into as their own cuisine, for example, hummus and falafel and all these kind of foods that known as a Middle Eastern dishes. So I saw that food, as well as history, as well as stories, it is an important element for our existence as a nation, to defend our identity, to reflect our identity to the world, so people can know who is the Palestinians, what is Palestine, what's going there. And it all can start from a small dish of hummus, a small plate of hummus. You can start a conversation over everything that has been going there. So that's why I saw the idea of the restaurant as a way of maintaining this identity, defending this identity, and reflecting it to everyone who doesn't know it.
I think that's a brilliant initiative that you've taken in a foreign land. It's also like you're raising awareness of what's going on in Palestine. And
Yes,
as your government says that, you should go for non-violent protests. I think this is the best non-violent protest to have, to open a business, open a restaurant in a foreign land with the aim of carrying on the Palestinian identity and preserving its heritage that is ironically lost in Palestine itself. So before we end this talk, Khair, I really want to know, because I've asked from my previous speakers as well, where do you find this bravery, courage, and resilience to keep on fighting Israel?
Simply from the truth of what we witness every day, of what we witnessed during all our lives. We don't need anyone to come and tell us what is the wrong and right about this struggle. We're living it, actually. We're exposed to it. It is a part of our lives, even if we want it or didn't want. So from that point of view, from that stand, from everything that from our history, from our heritage, from the stories of our grandmothers, the story of our parents, about what they've been exposed to. That's how it come to us. It is something that it's as the story of, it's today is Nakba. It's the story of those who left their lands in 1948 and they kept the keys with them on the hope of returning one day. They still hope for that. It's been 73 years and this hope still stands. If you go to any refugee camp in Syria, Lebanon, or if you go to any family living across the United States or over the seas, and you ask them, they will tell you, we still have the key. We still have the hope to return to our land.
That's so beautiful
and we will,
and
hopefully.
so sad at the same time. But I really hope that peace prevails, and whatever ulterior motive Benjamin Netanyahu has, possibly he wants to get reelected. There's all kinds of stories all around the internet that possibly it's because he wants to get reelected, and Israel is terming Palestine as a terrorist state because Palestine has killed 10 Israelis so far, whereas Israel has killed 140 Palestinians in just these 6 days that we speak about. If we talk about the history, as you say, then the number is too great to mention. Thank you so much, Khair, for your time. It means a lot to me and a lot to anybody who's watching this, that you spared so much time and you gave us this knowledge of what's happening in Palestine.
You're more than welcome. I'm also so happy to be sharing all these facts and information about what has been going here. And hopefully, inshallah, the situation will go to the best of what we all hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you.